Okay.
What am I supposed to
So, all right. Okay, so then what we're going to do, let's go down to Tsarevich Alexei. All right, Tsarevich Alexei, which country was he from? Lily Polsky.
I'm not on it yet. I can't, it didn't. It like went off of it.
Okay, so he was from Russia, and he was the son of the Tsar.
Who are we on?
Okay, and what disease did he had? He had hemophilia.
Wait, is that the dude who was like born with it?
Yeah, he was the guy who
That was like the bleeding thing, right?
Ah,
Okay, I'm there.
all right, so did that answer your question?
Yep. Who
Sorry.
is it?
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Any other questions about the people at the top?
I have one question.
Okay.
So, it's like not a question about the person, but it's a question like, oh wait, we have to. Okay, so which country was he from? The Alexei dude.
He was from Russia.
Yeah, and then and then where was the Rasputin from? Wasn't he from like?
He was from Russia, right?
He was from Russia. He was the guy who was treating Tsarevich Alexei.
He was a monk.
Yeah.
He was the monk, the creepy monk.
My computer is really slow. It's not.
Okay. Any other questions about the people?
I don't think she has.
Okay.
I have a question on Herbert Hoover.
Okay. So Herbert Hoover, he was the guy who was in charge of the U.S. Food Administration.
Thing again.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay.
Valerie.
Uh-huh.
What?
What?
What's happening?
I'm not talking.
My
I was about to say,
Okay.
what is
Here's what I'm
happening?
going to do. I'm going to mute all of you, and if you have a question, unmute yourselves, okay? That way we can make sure you guys can hear me. I don't think you can hear me very well.
Oh, my computer is so slow. Okay.
All right. So I'm muting everybody. If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself when I ask if there's questions, okay? All right. Oh, it's like so incredibly quiet now. It's really weird. Okay, so Audrey, I'm trying to mute you.
It's not working. I can't even mute myself. Okay.
Okay, Audrey, just don't talk then. Okay. All right. So we went over Tsarevich Alexei. Let's see, what else do we have? I think most of you guys recognized who the rulers were, which country they were from. Main thing was, do you remember the three cousins? So remember Kaiser Wilhelm, Tsar Nicholas II, and George V. Remember, they were all cousins. They were from Queen Victoria. Okay. So that would be a main thing to remember. Sir Edward Grey, he was the guy we watched in 37 Days, where he was the foreign secretary. So he was the one who's trying to stop the war. So he was the one who was trying to make sure that no one went to war, but that didn't really work out too well. Okay.
Miss Ballard.
Yes, sir.
I had a question on, the treaty and stuff, because I wasn't here whenever you did that.
Okay. So a lot of us had questions on the Treaty of Versailles. So let's go down to that, okay? Who was involved? So there were four main countries that were there. So you had Great Britain, you had Great Britain, France, and the United States were there, right? And Italy was there as well, but they didn't get a chance to do much, okay? Second part was, what was it? It was a treaty to end World War I. And what were some of the terms? The terms are like what you guys decide on. So the terms were, we talked about war reparations where they had to pay a lot of money. We talked about how they had to have a small army as well, or Germany, I'm talking about right now. And that Germany had to be, Germany was the country that was considered guilty of starting the whole war and all the deaths. So we talked about that. And we also talked about, I'm trying to think, they lost a lot of territory. We talked about how the Germans had a smaller navy. Is this all making sense? Shake your head if you remember this. Yay. Okay.
Miss Ballard, I have a question.
Okay, Audrey first. Yes, Audrey? Okay, you're muted for once, Audrey.
Sorry, hang on. What do you mean about like the 14 points? Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I had a question on.
14 points. So, and then I'll have Peyton's question just a second. Let's finish down with the Treaty of Versailles then. What were some problems with it? A main problem was Germany wasn't there, and the treaty was all about Germany. So that was a huge problem because the Germans had absolutely no say in it. Also, they had a lot of trouble disagreeing with what was going to be in the treaty, which a lot of you guys talked about. And then also the terms were very, very harsh to Germany. So it pretty much caused the Great Depression to be really, really bad in Germany because what they had to do as a result of losing was really hard. Okay, so then 14 points in the League of Nations. So the United States, when they came, or Woodrow Wilson people, they said Woodrow Wilson's main goal was to have his 14 points in the League of Nations. The 14 points was Woodrow Wilson's plan. It was the 14 things he wanted to happen with the treaty. Okay. The League of Nations was one of his 14 points. The League of Nations was kind of like an early United Nations where all of the countries could get together and talk, and that way they could hopefully not have any more wars because they could talk and prevent war. Does anyone else have any other questions about the League of Nations or the 14 points? Okay, Lily, I saw you had a comment.
Yeah, I had to type.
So Lily, what I would do is just get a piece of paper and then just write down notes right now, and then you can type them in later.
Miss Ballard, I didn't hear what you said about Herbert Hoover.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to Herbert Hoover in just a second. So Isabel said, can I say it again? So
I don't know how to exit this.
Well, do you need more help?
No, no. Okay. How do you like exit out of the chat part?
I don't know.
You go back to
Lily,
Lily, go to the search bar thing.
You just
And
search
type
bar?
in- Yeah, just go to Google Classroom. Like you normally do. You'll still be able to hear everybody. Like how on FaceTime, if you exit out of the screen, you'll still be able to hear whoever's talking to you. Same thing.
Okay, she's muted. We're good. Okay, so 14 points was Woodrow Wilson's plan that he came to Versailles with. Okay, and it was his 14 things he wanted for the Treaty of Versailles. One of the things he wanted was the League of Nations, which was like a early version of the United Nations where everyone got together and talked their problems out instead of killing each other in war. So that was the main thing with the League of Nations. Peyton, unmute yourself. You have a question. Oh, for Rasputin, you said on my sheet. What did he do that we talked about? Okay, so the thing we talked about with Rasputin is he was a very nasty guy, and he was the one who was supposed to be treating Prince Alexei for his hemophilia. Okay, and he was we would call him like a mystic. Like he would do all this kind of like witchcraft stuff, and it was not good stuff. But we really couldn't treat him. We just said that he was like hired by the royal family because they wanted him to treat Alexei, but a lot of people were very distrustful of him. All right, Annie, let's go back to your question, then we'll go to Kit. So Annie, Herbert Hoover was the guy who was in charge of the U.S. Food Administration, and he wanted everyone to conserve their food. Okay, so he was the guy who said, I want you to make sure that you are not eating a bunch of food and you're not wasting food, and you should plant victory gardens. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right, Kit, what's your question?
For who was involved, I say the countries, right?
Yeah, just like the three main countries that we pretended we were. So the United States, France, and Great Britain was the three that were involved.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Okay, crew. Who are the Bolsheviks? So under the Russian Revolution, we have the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks were one of the groups that fought in the Russian Revolution. They later became the Communist Party. The main thing you need to know is who their leader was. And their leader was Vladimir Lenin. So I'm going to type that in the chat so you know his name and can spell it correctly. Okay, so he was the guy who was in charge of what became the Communist Party during the Russian Revolution. He was a pretty nasty guy. Isabel, question.
Okay. I have a question about like the alliances thing, because on my paper you said, how did the UK end up fighting between Serbia and Austria?
Yeah.
So
a lot of you guys realize that alliances were important, but what I want you to think about is, so the United Kingdom, Great Britain, they had nothing to do with what started the war, right? When we had the assassination. So the question is, how did they end up fighting this war? So they got pulled in because they had alliances with other countries who pulled them into the war.
Okay.
Because the idea is you have to back up your buddy. So because Serbia went to war with Austria-Hungary, you don't have to know all of this, but this is what we talked about. Then Russia got involved. And then because Russia got involved, France got involved. And then because Russia and France were involved, then Great Britain were involved. So just remember, like, if you have to protect your buddy, and if your buddy goes to war, then all these other people get pulled in. Does that make sense? That was a question a lot of you guys had.
Okay, thanks.
Reese, the Bolsheviks were from Russia, part of the Russian Revolution. Other questions, guys? You're doing great. I feel like we got this down now. Okay, Central Powers. There were three countries for the Central Powers that you should know. The three main ones. So you have Germany. Germany is the big one. Austria-Hungary, so you could just write Austria, would be fine. And then the Ottoman Empire, which became Turkey.
Miss Ballard?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go and get something. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right, Miss Wilkinson.
So the telegram, that was called the Zimmerman telegram, right?
Yes.
Or, why did the U.S. enter the war?
Yeah, so let's go down. I think it's one of the last ones, guys. Did you just hear Trixie? Okay, so there's three things that were the main causes. So one of them was the Zimmerman telegram. Okay, so I just wrote it in the chat so you can spell it right. So this was when we had the British people intercepted a telegram between Germany and Mexico, where Germany told Mexico that if they fought against us in World War I, like if they attacked us, they would get all their land back that the United States had taken. Moose. So that's the Zimmerman telegram. That obviously made us really mad because we didn't want to fight the Mexicans. The other thing was the sinking of the Lusitania. Just put in your chat. So sinking of the Lusitania was when the Germans went and sank the passenger ship with all the civilians. And that's where we talked about how all the people washed up dead in Ireland. So that was a really big propaganda move where the Americans were really upset. And the third thing was unrestricted. Submarine warfare. Okay, and remember we talked about how the Germans decided, it's exactly what it is, Isabel. The Germans kept sinking ships, and they didn't have to announce that they were going to come sink your ship, and they could sink any ship they wanted. So they could sink a ship that was a hospital ship. They could sink a ship for America that was a neutral country, not just countries that they were at war at. So those were the three big things. Okay,
Miss Ballard.
program, you're sinking of the Lusitania, and unrestricted submarine warfare. Your three things.
Miss Ballard.
Yep.
Would it say if I said unannounced submarine warfare?
No, you should say unrestricted.
Miss Fowler, so when didn't the Lusitania, wasn't it carrying like bombs and weapons and
Yeah,
stuff
we
for Britain?
found out many years later. We sent divers down, and we found out that they actually were carrying weapons to fight the Germans. So technically, they could have torpedoed it, but at the time, we didn't know that. That's a good question. All right, Reese question. Reese question.
Is Reese even here?
I'm here. It wouldn't let me unmute myself.
That's okay.
I have a question on. Hold on. Wait, maybe I don't have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, never mind. I'm good.
Okay, so Peyton, the Bolsheviks we said were the communists in Russia that were led by Vladimir Lenin. And we talked about how they were like the people who eventually took over Russia and made it the Soviet Union. Okay. Lily, we talked about the Treaty of Versailles. 14 points was Woodrow Wilson's plan that he came to Versailles with, that he wanted all those things to pass into the treaty. It was like his plan. Okay. So if you just know it's Woodrow Wilson's plan, that's perfect. And one of those points was the start of the League of Nations. Okay. Other questions? Kit.
So for popular songs during World War I didn't have my packet, but I looked in Google Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's over there on Pack Up Your Troubles. Are there any more that we have to say?
Nope. Those are the two you should know.
Okay.
Okay. So we talked about, you guys listened to Over There. That's probably the most famous song from World War I, about sending the American troops over there to Europe to fight the Germans, essentially. Okay. Pack Up Your Troubles was also a popular one, but it wasn't really, it wasn't necessarily for the American troops. Okay. Crew, question.
Was the guilt clause, whether or not Germany, they thought Germany was the reason the war started? Was that the guilt clause?
Yes. So the guilt clause was saying that Germany was completely responsible for the entire war. And that was part of the Treaty of Versailles, was telling Germany they had to say that they were completely responsible. And while Germany did a lot of warmongering, we can say that they weren't only responsible. It was a lot to do with alliances. We talked about how like the alliances with Austria-Hungary caused the problem for Germany to get pulled in, and then Serbia pulled in Russia, pulled in France. So it really wasn't just Germany's fault. Great question. Any other questions? Oh, Reese, you do have a question.
Yes.
Oh, unmute yourself, hon. There you go.
My question was for crap, why do I keep losing it? No. Hold on. Okay, I can't find it again.
Okay. Why don't I look then at the study guide? Okay.
Oh, what role did they play alliances?
Okay.
I didn't hear that one.
Okay, so let me repeat that. So we talked about how the war started between Serbia and Austria. So what I'm looking for you to understand and to explain to me is, how did the United Kingdom get pulled in? How did Great Britain get pulled in? Well, because Great Britain was allies with Russia and France, and they got pulled in the war. So you have to back up your buddy when you have an alliance. So that's how all these countries got involved, and it made it a world war. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Some of you guys had questions about the war to end all wars. So for that part, you'll need to know how that was what they called it at the time. So people at the end of World War I, they would just say, hey, this was the war to end all wars because it was such a terrible, awful war. They said, we can't possibly have another war. We've learned our lesson. We'll never have another war. From now on, we'll just be peaceful. And we know now that that wasn't real. But at the time, they all the people thought that since the war was so bad, they couldn't possibly start another war. Let's see. Isabel question. Oh, Isabel got her question answered. Kit.
What everything about poppies that we like need to know?
If you know that it's because they grew in the ground after they had the battles because the soil was disturbed. If you know that they're a symbol of remembrance, and if you know about the poem about them, then you're good to go. Ms. Polsky, question?
Yes. Okay, so I'm confused about like for the Spanish flu. I read the article, but what are we just supposed to put like what it did, or are we supposed to put like?
So you should know what the Spanish flu was, okay? Yeah. And a lot of you guys were on point when you're like, this was a really bad coronavirus. Exactly. Okay. It was an influenza, which is like we would say, like we have the flu. It's like a really bad version of the flu. And it swept across the world. And it was called the Spanish flu because the King of Spain was the first person to actually say, hey, this is a problem. It didn't actually start in Spain. Okay.
So should we like put what it did or like put what it was?
You know it's a bad thing. And then I also said, make sure you know about St. Louis. And we talked about the reason I wanted you to read the article is St. Louis did a really good job of keeping people safe because people were told to stay home and they canceled all the activities. It should sound really familiar. So but when they're thinking about coronavirus now and how to keep people safe, a lot of people from around the country are studying what St. Louis did in the Spanish flu because most of our people lived here. Okay. So I just want you to understand that St. Louis did a really good job. We had one of the lowest death rates in the entire country. Okay.
Miss Ballard,
Audrey.
I have a question. Wait, what was my question? Never mind, I forgot it.
Okay, I'll come back to you after Isabel, okay? Isabel, question.
I remembered it.
Isabel, question.
Sorry. Okay. So if the Spanish flu didn't start in Spain or whatever, or wherever, where did it start? Like, why was it called the Spanish flu if it didn't start there?
I think from what I've read, it started in Fort Riley, Kansas, was the first time someone actually got it. I don't know where it came from originally, but that was the first time one of the soldiers had it. And then it went, because all of our soldiers were going to Europe, it went with our soldiers. And the soldiers went all over Europe, so they took it with them where they went. And it was a world war, so it went all over the world. So
it was like during World War One.
Yeah, it was the very end of World War I. So
okay,
it spread it at the end of the war, and then it went for like a year and a half before it calmed down.
Okay,
Miss Ballard, I remembered.
Hang on a second. So the reason it's called the Spanish flu is because the King of Spain was the first person to say, hey, this is a real problem. So everyone made fun of him and said, oh, that King of Spain, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Okay.
So it's called the Spanish flu.
Okay.
Great question. Audrey.
So for the In Flanders Fields, do we need to like write the poem or something?
No. Because you just know like who wrote it and when it was written and what it's about.
Because the only thing I said was like a poem about like the deaths of soldiers by Major John McCrae in 1915.
That's what you need to know. That's perfect.
So
yeah, Reese, I see you. And then Sage and Ren Oliver, who's wearing goggles. So Reese, question about problems Europe faced
at the end of World War I.
Yeah, at the end of the war. So you can talk about how lots of the men were dead, which means first of all, you're going to have less babies. So you're going to have, it's going to take a longer time to increase the population. Also, there were less men to work. So you had a smaller workforce. There's hardly any food because a lot of the farms have been destroyed. A lot of the cities have been destroyed. And you could also talk about how Germany was in a lot of debt after all this because of the war reparations they had to pay.
Okay.
Okay. Sage, question.
So why was it? How was St. Louis one of the lowest? Because it was like 200,000 people died, didn't it?
I don't remember the number, but comparatively, we were the lowest of the 10 major cities in the United States. We were the lowest, and that's because we did what we would say now is social distancing. We were the first city to do that and to implement that. And at the time, everyone thought the guy who was in charge of the safety and health in St. Louis was crazy, and they said, "This is ridiculous." But he actually saved a bunch of lives because he was a good leader. Why is she wearing goggles?
Hi.
Because we have our pool heated for the weekend.
Oh.
She thinks that she's going to go swimming in a few minutes.
Oh, very nice. Hi, Ron Oliver. All right, other questions, guys. You're doing a great job. Lily Polsky, I'm not sure why it won't let you open a new tab. What I would do is just write on a piece of paper right now, and then go back and edit it in the document later.
Ms. Ballard.
Yes, Audrey.
I don't have any more questions, so I'm gonna leave.
Okay, that's fine.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Miss Ballard.
Uh-huh.
So on our test, will we need to name all the allied countries and all the central countries?
No, you're going to have a
Powers, all that?
question where it's like, which of the following was not an allied power, or which of the following was not a central power? And it's multiple choice.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like little countries that I don't think you need to worry about. Lily had a good question. What is the test? So tomorrow I'm going to post the test online on Classroom, and it will be on there until Friday. So you can take it whenever you would like between Tuesday and Friday, as long as you promise not to use your notes or the internet or your mom or dad or the book or your dog. Okay. Isabel question, and then Crew.
Okay, so my question was like for the what empires are there again? Is that going to be like in our test?
No. Okay. We talked about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire, but that would not be on your test.
Okay.
Okay. Crew?
Thank you.
For like what alliances, what role do they play in causing the war? My answer was pretty vague and didn't really mean a lot because I didn't know a lot what to say there.
Mm-hmm. Just as long as you can explain how different countries get pulled into the war. Okay, so how did the United States get pulled in? Well, we didn't have any alliances, but everybody else did. So you could talk about how France got pulled in because they're allies with Russia, and the United Kingdom got pulled in because they're allies with France and Russia and Belgium. The idea is that a lot of these countries that had nothing to do with the original fight, which was the Archduke getting assassinated, got pulled in anyway.
Thank you.
Annie?
I didn't hear what you said about the Bolsheviks.
Okay, so that was a group of folks that were in Russia that became the Communist Party, and they were led by Vladimir Lenin.
Okay.
That's what you need to know. So there was the Russian Revolution. They became the Communist Party, and they were led by Vladimir Lenin. Any other questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So we can stay after and just talk to our friends, right?
Sure. As long as you don't do anything bad. What I'm going to do though is I've been recording this review session. So if you didn't hear something, I'll post it on Classroom so you guys can watch it if you didn't understand something and go back. Okay. I'm also going to post, you're welcome, Ms. Polsky. I'm also going to post an example. There's a part of the test where you're going to have to identify, there's going to be quotes different people said. So this is going to make you think about, well, who might have said this quote? So I'm going to give you some practice ones for you to get used to doing it. And there'll be answers at the bottom so you can just check. That'd be a good way to study for your test as well, okay? Let's see. That's all I know. So I will be around until noon today. I'm going to exit off the chat. But if you guys need anything or if you have any questions, go ahead and email me, text me, whatever you want. And I will be happy to answer any questions. The other thing is, if you're taking your test and you're like, Miss Ballard, this does not make sense, then what I want you to do is make sure you ask me.
I mean, if you want to point them out, that's fine, but
actually, if you guys are here, I can walk through the test with you. That'd probably help you. So hang on just a second. Let's see. Test. We'll just walk through it so you understand the different parts of it real quick. Okay, so let me do screen sharing real quick. Ooh. Oh no, why won't it let me share my screen? Hang on. Okay, you should be seeing my screen now. Okay, so you're going to get, this is your test. It's going to be on a Google form. Make sure to write your name. So you're going to start with multiple choice. Okay. Then you're going to have short answer. The important thing on here is that you can skip one. Okay. So you can pick one that you don't answer. And that way, if you don't know something, you don't feel as confident, you don't have to answer that. Make sure to use a complete sentence for each one and that you have the question, each answer. So don't start with it said, say the 14 points said. Okay, so that's your short answer section. And then you're going to have your quote section right here. It's going to look a little different for you. And you'll have an essay where you're going to choose two. And then your extra credit questions. Okay. That's all I'm going to show you of the test, but that will give you a pretty good example, a pretty good idea of what you're going to do. Any other questions before I sign off? Are you going to have that on Classroom tomorrow? Yes, the test will post on Classroom tomorrow. It's already set up. It's automatically going to post. So you can start it as soon as you wake up. Any other questions? Okay, so I am going to exit off, but I will be here all morning if you have a question. Checking my email constantly if you need anything. When did we learn the quotes? Okay, so the quotes, that part is going to be application. So you're going to have to think if it's a quote about the 14 points, it's probably Woodrow Wilson talking. So I'm going to give you an example sheet. I'm going to post on Classroom. It's optional, but you'll be able to check your answers. I'll have the answers on the bottom, and that will help you practice. Most people do really well on it. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to exit off. I will be here, though, if you need